From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. This is Dateline Malacañang, and I'm your host, Leo Magpayo. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Monday lauded local governments, emergency responders, and volunteers for their rapid and coordinated efforts as Super Typhoon Uwan, with international name Fongwong, battered Luzon, emphasizing that preemptive evacuations were crucial in saving lives. In a social media post, the president thanked local governments, first responders, and volunteers for acting swiftly and working together to protect the Filipino people. According to government data, Uwan, one of the strongest storms to hit the country this year, displaced over 160,000 families, primarily in Bicol, Quezon, and Central Luzon. Evacuees are currently housed in temporary shelters. The Office of Civil Defense, or OCD, confirmed 4 deaths, with 2 more under verification, and reported widespread flooding in Pangasinan and Aurora. Uwan made landfall in Dinalungan, Aurora on Sunday evening, unleashing powerful winds and torrential rain that triggered landslides, power outages, and significant damage to crops and infrastructure. Malacañang said President Marcos has ordered continuous relief and rehabilitation efforts and instructed agencies to remain on high alert for post-typhoon recovery and monitoring.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has ordered continuous relief and rehabilitation operations in areas devastated by Super Typhoon Uwan, which made landfall Sunday evening. In a press briefing Monday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the President directed all government agencies to remain on full alert, prioritizing evacuation, medical response, and road clearing efforts. President Marcos instructed the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, to sustain relief distribution and closely monitor the condition of evacuees. The DSWD reported that the Bicol region, which bore the brunt of the storm, recorded the highest number of displaced families at 100,050. In Camarines Sur alone, 44,000 families were affected, while Quezon Province logged around 20,000 under the Calabarzon region. Castro noted that flood waters have begun to recede, allowing some families to return home. The chief executive also directed Health Secretary Ted Herbosa to deploy medical teams to all evacuation centers and tasked Public Works Secretary Vince Dizon with accelerating the clearing and repair of damaged roads. Government data show 71 roads remain impassable, mostly in Central Luzon and the Cordillera Administrative Region. The Office of Civil Defense reported severe flooding in Pangasinan, which has since subsided. 4 deaths were confirmed, with 2 still under validation. No missing persons have been reported. President Marcos also ordered agencies to maintain 24-hour weather monitoring and continue rehabilitation efforts in areas previously hit by tropical cyclones Tino and Uwan.
Patuloy na pagbibigay tulong at deployment ng medical teams pinag-utos si Pangulong Marcos Jr. Agad umaksyon si Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. ilang oras matapos mag-landfall ang Super Typhoon Uwan sa Dinalungan, Aurora noong Linggo ng gabi. Sa pulong kaninang umaga, ipinag-utos ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. sa Department of Social Welfare and Development o DSWD sa pangunguna ni Secretary Rex Gatchalian ang tuloy-tuloy na pagbibigay tulong sa lahat ng mga sinalanta ng bagyo. Ayon sa DSWD, patuloy nilang binabantayan ang mga evacuation operations at status ng mga evacuees. Sa Bicol Region na itala, ang may pinakamaraming bilang ng evacuees matapos na umabot sa 100,050 na mga pamilya ang apektado roon. Sa Camarines Sur, aabot sa 44,000 families habang nasa 20,000 families naman ang apektado sa Quezon Province sa Calabarzon. Ayon sa OCD, 426,000 families ang narelocate agad na nakatulong na mapababa ang bilang ng taong nalagay sa peligro. Inaasahan naman na makakabalik na sa kanilang mga tahanan ang mga nasa evacuation centers matapos na unti-unting paghupa ng tubig baha doon. Ipinag-utos din ng Pangulo sa Department of Health o DOH sa pangunguna ni Secretary Ted Herbosa na siguraduhing mayroong mga medical teams sa lahat ng evacuation centers upang mabantayan ang kalusugan ng mga evacuees. Agad na pinasimulan din ng Pangulo sa Department of Public Works and Highways o DPWH sa pangunguna ni Secretary Vince Dizon ang rehabilitation efforts sa mga nasirang kalsada upang hindi maantala ang pagpapadala ng tulong sa anumang panig ng bansa. Sa datos ng pamahalaan, mayroong 71 na mga kalsada ang hindi pa madaanan dahil sa epekto ng bagyo, kabilang nasa Central Luzon at Cordillera Administrative Region o CAR, lalo na sa Mountain Province, Benguet at Apayao. May mga ilang kalsada rin ang hindi pa madaanan sa Aurora sa report ng Office of the Civil Defense. Pangasinan ang lubhang naapektuhan ng pagbaha na agad din namang humupa matapos na ang pananalasa ng Super Typhoon Uwan. Ayon sa OCD, 4 ang naitalang nasawi dahil sa Super Typhoon Uwan, pero 2 dito ang binabalidate pa ng ahensya. Wala namang naitalang missing persons, pero nilinaw ng OCD na nagpapatuloy pa rin ang rescue operations sa Pangasinan. Ipinag-utos din ng Pangulo sa lahat ng ahensya ng pamahalaan ang walang humpay na pagbabantay sa lagay ng panahon mula ngayong araw hanggang bukas. Pinapaalalahanan din ng Pangulo ang lahat ng concerned agencies na ipagpatuloy ang rehabilitation efforts sa mga lugar na sinalanta ng Bagyong Tino at sa mga lugar na napinsala ng Super Typhoon Uwan.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang on Monday said the Philippines has begun receiving offers of humanitarian and disaster relief assistance from several countries in the aftermath of Super Typhoon Uwan. In a Palace Press briefing, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said allies including the United States, Japan, and India, have expressed their intent to provide aid. Southeast Asian neighbors such as Singapore and Timor-Leste have also reached out to the Philippine government. The international support comes as President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. ordered round-the-clock relief and rehabilitation operations in areas severely affected by Uwan, which displaced hundreds of thousands across Luzon. Castro noted that the countries established coordination channels with foreign partners through defense and humanitarian agreements enable faster deployment of aid. She also highlighted the logistical role of Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement or EDCA sites, which continue to serve as hubs for relief goods, medical missions, and repacking operations.
Maraming bansa, maliban po sa US, na nag-offer ng kanilang mga tulong para sa humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, including po ang US, Japan, Singapore, India, and Timor-Leste. Nagpadala na rin po sila ng sulat sa AFP at sa National Defense. Opo, ang EDCA naman po ay isang agreement sa pagitan po ng US at ng Pilipinas, kung saan po ina-identify yung mga lokasyon para po sa tinatawag nating humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Sa ngayon po, tumawag din po kami sa AFP kung ano na po ang nangyayari at anong naitutulong ito. Sa ngayon po ay inaalam pa po nila at hinahanap pa po ang pinaka-update patungkol dito. Pero ang EDCA sites po ay malaking tulong po kapag ka po may mga sakuna na nangyayari sa atin. Dito po ay nagiging silbiya ang nagsisilbi itong hubs para sa mas mabilis na pagtulong sa ating mga kababayan. Nandiyan po ang paggamit po ng Fort Magsaysay bilang distribution, relief goods ng, during the previous disasters. At madalas pong magamit din po ito bilang fisherman's shelter. At mga DSWD and AFP repacking sites. So yan po ang malaking na itutulong po ng EDCA sites sa ating bansa.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Monday, Malacañang said that local officials who reportedly traveled abroad during the onslaught of Super Typhoon Uwan will be evaluated by the Department of the Interior and Local Government, or DILG, before any accountability measures are taken. In a palace press briefing, Presidential Communications Office or PCO Undersecretary Claire Castro said the government will assess whether the officials' foreign trips compromised disaster response efforts in their respective areas. Asked if sanctions could be imposed for violating the DILG's directive requiring local executives to remain in their posts during calamities, Castro said the palace will defer to Interior Secretary John Vic Rimulya. The DILG earlier reminded governors, mayors, and other local officials to stay within their areas of responsibility and personally oversee emergency operations as Uwan, one of the year's most powerful typhoons, battered Luzon on Sunday.
Unang-una po ay kailangan muna itong ma-assess ano ba talaga ang kanilang pakay papunta sa ibang bansa. At kung ito po ba talaga ay naka-apekto sa mabilisang pag-aksyon para sa mga kababayan natin na nakaranas ng hagupit ng bagyo. At hindi po natin agad ito masasabi na sila ay may sala na. Kailangan po pag-aralan muna. Titingnan mo po muna natin at ito naman po ay nasa pamumuno ni Secretary John Vic Rimulya. Tignan po natin at kung paano sila mag-explain na despite that na may memorandum ay sila po ay umalis ng bansa.
Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Still on Monday, Malacañang clarified that the 5,000 peso and 10,000 peso cash assistance given to families affected by Typhoon Tino with the international name Kalmegi was only part of the government's broader aid package. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro addressed public concerns during a briefing, responding to social media posts questioning the sufficiency of the financial support. Castro emphasized that, in addition to the cash aid, local government units also received funding to support recovery efforts in their respective areas. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., during his visit to Cebu last Friday, announced that families with partially damaged homes were granted 5,000 pesos, while those whose houses were totally destroyed received 10,000 pesos.
Hindi po kailangan batikusin dahil noong nakaraang administrasyon, ganyan din po ang halaga na binigay na paunang tulong. Ito ay paunang tulong. Tandaan po natin, ang Pangulo po ay nagbigay na po ng 760 million sa mga apektado na lugar na misinalanta ng Bagyong Tino. At ang pagbigay po na to ay pansamantala pong ibinibigay sa ating mga kababayan para mayroon po silang panggastos. At sinabi po ng Pangulo na ito ay ongoing at patuloy po ang pagtulong. At kinakailangan po na yung iba ay ma-relocate dahil po sila ay nasa no building zone. So yun po ay agarang pagtulong po. Ibig sabihin, ang ibinibigay na cash assistance po ay pagtulong po sa pamilya. Iba po yung ibinibigay mismong tulong ng Pangulo, ang pondo, mismo sa mga LGUs para po makarecover ang nasabing lugar. Opo, pero meron pong karugtong. Continuing at patuloy po ang pagtulong. So, ibig sabihin, hindi po doon natatapos ang pagtulong ng Pangulo.
Was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, has approved the release of 1.684 billion pesos to replenish the Quick Response Funds, or QRFs, of key agencies leading post-disaster relief and recovery efforts following Typhoon Tino and Super Typhoon Uwan. In a statement Monday, the DBM said the Department of Agriculture, or DA, Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, and the Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG, will receive the funds under President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive to accelerate rehabilitation in affected areas. Of the total, 1 billion pesos was allocated to the DA to support recovery in regions hit by African swine fever and recent storms and to prepare for future weather disturbances. The DA's QRF will cover crop and livestock inputs, facility repairs, and aid for farmers and fisher folks under the 2025 national budget. The DSWD received 631.023 million pesos to sustain relief operations, including food packs, non-food items, and emergency cash transfers for nearly 59,000 affected families. Budget Secretary Amena Pangandaman said the replenishment ensures continued support for disaster-hit communities. Earlier in October, the DBM also released 1.982 billion pesos to the DSWD for QRF replenishment. Meanwhile, 53.007 million pesos was allocated to the PCG to enhance its search, rescue, and relief operations. Super Typhoon Uwan, one of the strongest storms this year, battered the Bicol region and Aurora province over the weekend before sweeping through central Luzon.
Dateline Malacañang.
In recent developments, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, reported the death toll from Typhoon Uwan, with the international name Wong, has climbed to 6. In its 6th Tuesday morning update, the agency said 3 fatalities were recorded in Barzon, Mimaropa, Bicol, Western Visayas, Negros Island Region, Eastern Visayas, Zamboanga Peninsula, Northern Mindanao, Caraga, and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or BARM. Bicol reported the highest number of affected individuals at 1,163,473, followed by Negros Island Region with 198,120, and Eastern Visayas with 186,532. Of the total affected population, 803,610 people, equivalent to 231,215 families, were housed in evacuation centers, while 265,224 individuals, equivalent to 78,093 families, sought shelter elsewhere.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, a Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, or CBCP official on Monday, called on the faithful to not only to thank the Sierra Madre for shielding Luzon from powerful storms, but to actively protect the mountain range from further destruction. Bishop Gerardo Alminaza, Vice Chair of the CBCP Episcopal Commission on Social Action, Justice and Peace, said, safeguarding the Sierra Madre is a moral responsibility, especially as it continues to serve as a natural barrier against typhoons. In a radio interview, Alminaza said, if God continues to save us through creation, then the least we can do is protect creation in return. He stressed that the Church's role must go beyond relief efforts. Alminaza warned that the Sierra Madre is already suffering from quarrying, illegal logging, and other destructive activities, which threaten its ability to protect communities from natural disasters. Stretching from Cagayan to Quezon Province, the Sierra Madre was credited for weakening Super Typhoon Uwan, which lashed several parts of Luzon on Sunday under signal number 5. According to Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration, or PAGASA, Uwan weakened into a typhoon as it passed over Luzon's mountainous terrain, including the Sierra Madre.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, is ramping up its global presence and strengthening welfare programs for overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, through new offices, expanded staffing, and interagency initiatives. In a radio interview in Hong Kong on Monday, Migrant Workers Secretary Leo Magpayo said the DMW is transitioning from building the house to delivering services as it continues to establish migrant workers' offices, or MWOs, in key locations abroad. Magpayo said the agency has sworn in around 800 new employees, building a stronger and better equipped workforce. He added that President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has directed the DMW to prioritize protection and responsive solutions for OFWs. Since its creation, the DMW has opened MWOs in Vienna, Budapest, and Bangkok, bringing the total to 42, with plans to reach 45 by the year end. Magpayo said the department is also focused on repatriation and crisis response, citing recent operations in Sudan, Myanmar, and the Middle East. By 2026, the DMW plans to build a larger migrant workers shelter in Hong Kong, which will also serve as a training and resource center. The department is rolling out preventive health measures, programs, and medical retainers for OFWs with health concerns. To prepare Filipinos for emerging job markets, the DMW is partnering with the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, and the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, to train workers for roles in the digital, green, and care economies. Magpayo also called on recruiters to expand job opportunities for women beyond domestic work. Meanwhile, the DMW continues its OFW Servicio Caravan, bringing services from 15 to 16 government agencies directly to Filipino workers abroad.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service is live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.